There's an old cynical joke. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one, and they're all full of crap. This has made me laugh in the past, but it also kind of pains me. I think opinion formation is very important to any possibility of a democratic politics. People need to be able to form their opinions on topics of public controversy in a way that goes beyond the cynical joke's attitude. The cynical joke thinks everyone already has an opinion. It's something that's fully formed and simply comes with being alive and looking around. On some topics, this is no doubt true. Somebody loves Frito-Lays and someone else doesn't. What else is there to say? When we think of opinions like this, we imagine opinions as being purely subjective, purely based on whim or preference, and having no basis in knowledge. In this imagination of what an opinion requires, opinions are much weaker and much easier to come by than knowledge. In your schooling, if it was anything like mine, you might have also heard this kind of idea. When we have knowledge of something, we should act and think on that basis. If we have to go on opinion, it's only because we lack knowledge. But I want to put forward a different point of view. One way to think about expertise is it's the level of knowledge that someone has in order to have an informed opinion. When you learn something for the first time in an introductory course, you probably learn a lot of the basic concepts, maybe the history of it, some practices that are important for the subject that you're talking about. You might not realize that the field of knowledge that you're in, at the very top, at the level at which people are actively practicing it, there's a great deal of controversy. There are active research questions and maybe old ones that have divided the field in some way. When we look for an expert opinion, we look for someone who's knowledgeable enough that they can come in and render an opinion that will have some authority for us. When we're talking about public opinion, oftentimes we ignore the level of knowledge that's required for the public to form an opinion. This has something to do with the way, especially in the American context, that public opinion has been framed historically. In the post-World War II era, there were a lot of social scientists who were concerned with democratic politics and were trying to understand how democratic politics could exist in a mass society when you had something like radio and pretty soon television. What would it mean for the public to form an opinion on the hundreds of possible topics that were relevant to democratic politics? One of the ways that they tried to do this was first to get knowledge about where the public stood, and they created what we're very familiar with today, the public opinion poll. If we took public opinion and we compared it to expert opinion, it looks very ridiculous. Experts know a lot of stuff in their field. They've trained for many years in order to render some opinion. And there, at that point, the expert appears as an individual, whether that's in a law court or on the news or in a piece that they've written themselves. The public only ever appears as a mass because it's imagined from the point of view of that post-World War II era. Today, we live in a completely different era. Most people don't imagine the public as what comes on the TV or what comes over the radio. They don't accept that public opinion comes out of the mouth of a news anchor or a journalist because we have social media. People speak directly into their phones and can broadcast to the whole world. There's something that's really remarkable about that. Even if looking into the current situation in the world, there's a lot to be improved about the way that social media works. One of the ways that we might try to improve it is actually improving the quality of the opinions that we have and the way that we evaluate opinions. Of course, there's a lot that mediates between an individual member of the public and all of the other ones. There's algorithms, there's the corporations that actually own these social media platforms and that can choose what content is able to be shown there and what is not. There's all the weird effects that come from celebrity culture and influencers and the trends and the styles of social media that make certain things popular and others not. But we can still recognize that social media is a very powerful force. And if most of us imagine the public, if we imagine it at all, we imagine it more like someone appearing to us in a front-facing video speaking their mind. How can we improve the situation of political discourse and discourse on any topic of public concern and interest? One of the things that we can do, since we can't change the algorithms and the platforms, is try to think about what would make a quality opinion. Rather than assuming that all opinions are bad, that all opinions just kind of randomly appear, we have to move past that post-World War II framework that imagined opinions are things that people already have. On most topics, you would probably be able to say more about what you know than what you think should be the case. If I asked you something about climate change, I'm sure you would know some basic information about it. If I asked what you think we should do, you might also have an opinion on that topic. If I asked you to compare that idea of what you should do to something like carbon capture or the question of ocean acidification, you might realize that the amount of information or knowledge that you have needs to be adjusted in order for you to form an opinion. So in forming an opinion, it's not that we go off of not knowing, it's actually that we have to have a whole huge base of knowledge in order to recognize what is controversial and therefore form an opinion on the basis of that knowledge, but also our values, our experience, our sense of what is right in the world, what's likely to happen, all of these kinds of things. That's not dissimilar to the way that experts form their opinion. They have a huge base of knowledge that they can stand on in order to see what the controversies are really about and then render an opinion with authority. The kind of opinion I'm talking about could not be further from a hot take. These are cold, slow. What follows is a series of 3 short lectures that should help guide you in thinking about the first steps in this process. The first lecture will be about what constitutes an acceptable topic for public speech. Some of this has to do with questions about our contemporary media environment. Some of it has to do with practical questions about how much can we really expect someone to be able to know and talk about. Some of it is a rhetorical thing. What's really going to connect with people? So that's going to be the first lecture. How to find the right framework and scope for a topic that you can begin to investigate through reading and listening to other people's opinions. The second one has to do with media diet. What are we going to do in order to understand what the topic is that we've chosen to talk about? Well, we're going to have to listen and read to a lot of stuff. Maybe you noticed that there is no assigned reading in this class. That does not mean that there is no reading in the class. You'll have to do a fair bit of reading in the next few weeks in order to form an opinion that will meet the standard of a public imagined as an assemblage of all reasonable people. We're not imagining a public here of just the person who's most willing to believe us, like the old joke about the bear. The second lecture will be about our media diets. I don't know about you, but sometimes I kind of go off my diet a little bit. Maybe I spend a little bit too much time on X, formerly known as Twitter, and just get really depressed with the level of stuff that I'm seeing. Or maybe you spend a little bit too much time on TikTok, or maybe you just are playing a lot of phone games. I don't think we need to feel guilty about any of this, but we do maybe need to have some concrete practices in order to think about how to make our media diet more various, a little bit more diverse, and, let's admit it, a little bit more serious with the level that it treats the topics it talks about. So how can we get out of the hot take economy? What are some practices that we can use? That's what the next lecture will be. Finally, the third lecture will be about how to discover what is already thought on a particular issue. And we're going to talk at 3 different levels of opinion. One is the level of commonsensical opinion. What would be reasonable, sight unseen, for anyone to think about this particular topic? The more narrow we can make the topic, the more texture we can give to that common sense opinion. But we also want to think about the kinds of opinions that circulate either as expert opinions or as serious, committed, but public popular opinions. So that lecture will be about how to find those particular sources and how to